Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Fair Catch Podcast. It's your host, Gabe Calderon, covering Week 7 in the NFL. I hope you're all recovering from that wild Sunday just a few days ago. Man, is there a lot to talk about. But real quick, before we get started, just want to make a few announcements. First off, there's going to be a new format for the show this week, as there will be for every future episode. Just trying to shake things up, give the listeners something new every week. We'll get into that in just a second. And lastly, next week and in the weeks to come, I'm going to be looking to have guests on the show for a 15 to 20 minute segment to have a back and forth discussion about a hot topic around the league. So stay tuned for that. Well, enough of that, man. I'm fired up for this week's podcast. A lot of action, a lot of good football this Sunday. Let's jump right into it. So we're going to start things off with our 60-second Sunday recap and jump right into the week's studs and duds from around the league, and then flow into an in-depth analysis and recap of Sunday's games for a while. The NFC North, wild division so far. We're going to break down that division in the opinionated segment midway through the podcast, followed by my power rankings of the top 10 teams league-wide. And to finish things off, we're just going to preview Week 8 and what to expect next Sunday. So let's get right into it. Cardinals putting us to sleep Thursday night hosting the Broncos. Mike Vrabel played Russian roulette and lost badly in London. Comeback of the year for the Panthers. Minnesota steamrolled in the second half out at MetLife Stadium. Bills thankfully gave us one less game to pay close attention to. And a wild Hail Mary coming up 1 yard short for the Bears at home. Another overtime affair for Hugh Jackson's team. And Blake Bortles benched amidst another absolutely embarrassing, disgraceful performance by the Jags. Detroit ran all over Miami down in Florida. And the Saints' prayers were answered in Baltimore. Ground and pound day for the Skins in a divisional game at home. And the Rams bulldozed right over the Niners to remain undefeated. Surprising blowout, to everyone's surprise, Sunday night. And the Giants fall yet again, to no one's surprise. So with that being said, let's hop into our studs and duds from around the league this week. We're going to talk about fantasy football, standard PPR scoring, who showed up, who didn't put their big boy pants on. For our studs, we got two Chiefs leading the pack this week, Kareem Hunt and Patty Showtime. You know, Kareem Hunt, the quiet workhorse for Andy Reid's Army. He's averaging 17 carries a game and 77 yards rushing. You know, nothing to scoff at. But, you know, in the beginning of the year, wasn't really putting up the fantasy numbers that owners hoped. But boys, he showed up recently. 37.1 points against the Bengals. 15 carries for 86 yards and a score on the ground. And he caught 5 catches and scored twice through the air. He's coming in at number 1 for us. Number 2 is counterpart Patty Showtime. Number 1 fantasy quarterback so far this year by a long shot. And he's an auto start. If you have him every week, I don't care if he's throwing with his left arm. I don't care if they're playing with their 5th receivers. He put up 32.8 points against the Bengals. You know, 6 consecutive 300-yard passing game for him. Completed 28 of his passes, scored 4 times, threw 1 pick. You know, it's ridiculous. You know, Patrick Mahomes has been surprising everyone this year, and I don't see it slowing up anytime soon. Start him every week if you have him. Marlon Mack. If he's not taken in your league, go grab him off waivers. But, you know, I'm sure a lot of people did last week. You know, he's undoubtedly the primary back now for the Colts. You know, he put up 31.9 points in the blowout against Buffalo. Got a lot of work considering the game script. 126 yards on 19 carries and a score. Also caught a few passes for a touchdown. You know, like I said, go out and grab him. Pick him up off waivers. Try to get him for something cheap. You know, his value is going to be there. He's going to be getting carries. And Todd Gurley coming in at number 4. He's probably going to be making our list every week. I mean, what can he do? I mean, another 3-touchdown game? He's on pace for some ridiculous, like, LaDainian Tomlinson-like numbers this year. Put up 30.6 points in the blowout against the Niners. You know, they contained him. The 49ers did a good job at containing him in terms of yards per carry. He only rushed 15 times for 63 yards, but he scored 3 times. You know, I mean, twice on the ground and 1 through the air. You know, if he doesn't get the job done on the ground in terms of yardage, he's scoring touchdowns for you. It's just ridiculous. I mean, by far the best running back in the league, the best fantasy running back in the league. Man's a beast. And, no matter how hard I try, I can't break away from this guy. I mean, his production on the field has led him to become the number one fantasy wide receiver. And without question, one of the best overall in the league. And he came through with a 7th consecutive 100-yard game and posting 26 fantasy points. Adam Thielen. 9 catches for 110 yards against the Jets and 1 touchdown. He was targeted 10 times. He didn't just catch the ball once. That was it. Kirk Cousins loves this guy. Fantasy owners love this guy. I love this guy. I want him on my team. Now we got to highlight the duds of the week. There's a lot to choose from this week, so I had to really pick them out wisely. We're going to start with Andy Dalton at number 1. He only completed 50% of his passes Sunday night for just under 150 yards. He only threw 1 touchdown and threw a pick. Posted 7.9 points. My kicker, Kaimi Fairbairn for the Texans, I mean, he put up more points, and now we go to another quarterback who only completed 50% of his passes, and he's been hot recently. So this came as a little bit of a surprise to me. Deshaun Watson, 139 yards and only 1 touchdown. Posted 10.9 points. Now, I understand they had control of that game. They were giving Lamar Miller a lot of carries, blowing out Jacksonville on the road. But still, big disappointment for fantasy owners. And coming in at number 3, man, what happened to this guy? Demaryius Thomas. Remember when he used to be a beast? I mean, all year he's been performing subpar, to say the least. Against the blowout against Arizona, only 5 catches for 42 yards. 9.2 points. Emmanuel Sanders has really emerged as the number 1 wide receiver out in Denver, and rightfully so. I think he's a more overall dynamic receiver. He's more athletic, better route runner. And Demaryius, I don't know if you can start him. He's like borderline a wide receiver 3 in most leagues, in my opinion. Coming in at number 4, throwing 2 running backs together, Mark Ingram and Joe Mixon. Disappointing outing for Joe Mixon on my fantasy team this week. I understand Ingram splits carries with Kamara, and Mixon just got left at the bus stop by Marvin Lewis. But fantasy production-wise, neither of these players scored a touchdown, and both only had 13 carries for under 50 yards apiece. Disappointing fantasy outing, for owners, sub 10 points apiece for both these guys. And Stephon Diggs, this was the surprise of the week to me when I saw this stat line. He's coming in at number 5. He had 14 targets on Sunday against the Jets. 14. He only had 8 catches for 33 yards and no touchdowns. The Jets really held him to a lot of underneath stuff. He only put up 10 points. And most of those points just came off receptions. Adam Thielen has emerged as the number 1 wideout without question in Minnesota. But still, Stephon Diggs is no slouch. I'm hoping that he gets back to a consistent level, 70, 80-yard games. The catches are there, but got to see more yards. We got to see score. He hasn't seen the end zone in weeks. So that's going to wrap up our studs and duds of the week. We're going to hop right into our weekly recap, league-wide coverage. We're going to start out in Lincoln Financial Field. The visiting Panthers coming in against the disappointing loss to the Redskins 2 weeks ago. After going 3 and out on their first possession, the Eagles went on a 15-play, 77-yard drive, only to miss a field goal. They had 2 fourth-down conversions on that drive. And since 2016, since Doug Peterson took over, they ranked first in fourth-down attempts, conversions, 2-point attempts, and 2-point conversions. A lot of aggressive play calling from Doug. Eagles fans love it. It's good. It's good to see. It's good to see. It's putting the Eagles in a lot of good positions to win games. But unfortunately, man, we're going to talk about their defense in just a second. The Eagles' screen game was really on point early, and they were looking good. They were getting everyone involved. Corey Clement, Wendell Smallwood, Nelson Aguilar. And they scored on their next 3 possessions. Wentz looked great, despite 2 fumbles he had on the day. And Carolina, off to another slow start. They only had 29 yards of total offense midway through the second quarter. And they didn't complete a third down for a while. Newton looked shaky. McCaffrey was virtually non-existent the whole afternoon. I really thought this was going to be a repeat of last week in Washington. Carolina was shut out basically the first three quarters until Curtis Samuel finally found the end zone late in the third. Panthers scored touchdowns on back-to-back drives late in the fourth quarter. And keep in mind, this was a 17-0 football game with about 2 minutes left in the third. 17-0 at home midway through the third. They gave up a little touchdown to Curtis Samuel that kind of sparked something in the Panthers. Gave them a little momentum, something to believe in. And they came right back. The Panthers scored touchdowns on back-to-back drives late in the fourth quarter. They brought this to a 3-point game. The Panthers went on a 7-play, 87-yard drive. In under 3 minutes, they scored real quick. Defense for the Eagles looked flustered. The Panthers' defense finally showed up, after holding Philly to a 3-and-out. The Panthers go on a ridiculous 10-play drive in under a minute. 70-yard drive in under a minute. They took a 21-17 lead late in the fourth quarter. It was silent in Philly. It was quiet. Fans looked shocked. Doug Peterson looked shocked. Carson Wentz couldn't believe it. Carolina's D came up huge late in the fourth, forcing the Eagles to punt. And the Panthers converted on a huge 4th and 10. And that's what led them to take the 21-17 lead. They scored 21 unanswered points. 21 unanswered points. And came away with the win in Philly. Their defense just sealed the Panthers' bank heist of the decade, recovering a Carson Wentz fumble. The Eagles got mugged. They got robbed. This was embarrassing. Jim Schwartz shouldn't have been allowed in the locker room after the game. This was terrible. You're at home. I know it's a little thing to say, but you're at home. You can't be blowing 17-0 leads when you're holding Carolina to, sub-average yardage on offense. Christian McCaffrey was doing nothing. And it took Cam Newton like 45 minutes to get something going. The Eagles got to look to bounce back next week against Jacksonville. And they got to bounce back fast. Now we move out to MetLife. Wasn't that much action in this game. Vikings taking on the Jets. Vikings pulled away with this one 37-17. This game got off to an ugly start. I was hesitant about covering this game, but I said, what the hell, love watching Minnesota play. But, there was 12 punts in the first half. It was a fumble. It was a missed field goal. And I started to regret it. Started shaking my head. I'm like, is this going to be an ugly, 17-14 kind of ball game with like 20 punts, a handful of turnovers. The Vikings scored on their opening drive with a bomb to Adam Thielen. And that was the only touchdown they scored until midway through the third quarter. Jets defense looked good. Like I mentioned in the studs and duds section, they were really holding Stephon Diggs. It's a lot of underneath stuff, minimal yardage. They were sort of containing Latavius earlier in the game. We'll get into that in just a second. But, Sam Darnold, he led the Jets on a nice scoring drive towards the end of the opening quarter. But unfortunately, that was really the only highlight on the day for the young quarterback. He finished the afternoon with 3 picks and fumbled it twice. It was a low-scoring game at halftime. The Vikings led 10-7. And like I said, the Jets defense did a good job all afternoon containing Diggs. They kind of held Latavius, but, he extended. Latavius, I'm glad that he's been getting work. And, understandably, Dalvin Cook's been sidelined. But he's been showing up in the past few weeks. And it's good to see because no one knows how long Dalvin Cook's going to be sidelined. Hammy injuries, they linger. It's week to week. It's day to day. Who knows? But for the, in the third quarter, he had 2 rushing touchdowns on the afternoon. The first one came to kind of extend the lead, 17-10. And oh my, it was just downhill for the Jets after that. I just want to put it in perspective just how downhill this went for the Jets. The Jets punted the ball 8 times and turned the ball over 5 times. And not to mention, the players put the ball on the turf 5 times. 5 times. But, they were fortunate to only lose one of those fumbles. This game just got blown wide open. Minnesota steamrolled, blew the Jets out by 20. And the highlight of this game was Adam Thielen, 7th straight 100-yard receiving game. Big production on the day. Another questionable game. Again, it sucks, covering these blowouts. I mean, the Buffalo Bills and the Derek Anderson experiment. I mean, they scored 5 points. 3 points on offense. They got a rinky-dink safety. They lost by 32. The Colts put up 37 points at home. And I was debating whether or not to even talk about this game. It was just awful. I want to just try to keep this short and just highlight some of the takeaways from this just abysmal performance by the Bills. LaShawn McCoy went down early in that game for anyone that was watching. Doubt it was many. He went down with, at first it kind of looked like an ankle injury, leg injury, but then, we got word it was a head injury. And that just pretty much told every fan watching that game just how that game was going to go. The Bills had 5 possessions in the first half. All right. 5 possessions. They either punted, fumbled, or threw a pick on each of those drives. Now, Derek Anderson got the start. He got the start for Buffalo, and that did not go the way Bills fans hoped. The man, 3 picks and a fumble. Oh, man, Mr. Anderson. I feel for him having to start for that team. Lack of offense. That team is just bad. Surprisingly, it was a lot of empty seats at Lucas Oil Stadium. I was kind of shocked, but then again, can't blame Colts fans for wanting to come out and see the 1-5 Colts take on the Bills. But they shut out Buffalo 23-0 at halftime. Marlon Mack, we talked about him for a bit in the studs and duds section. Highlight of the game, 126 yards of real estate on 19 carries. 2 touchdowns. I think it's without question. The real takeaway from this game, besides T.Y. Hilton coming back, he looked great, by the way, T.Y. Caught 2 touchdowns. Only had 4 catches, though, for 24 yards or something like that. But again, he's coming off injury. Got to ease him back in there. I don't know what his snap count percentage was or anything like that, but I'm sure he's going to be back to the form we all know T.Y. Hilton, to perform at. But back to Marlon Mack, I think he's solidified himself as the main back down there in Indianapolis. I'm sure he'll give away a few carries every now and then to Nyheim Hines, but for the most part, Marlon Mack looks great. Nothing really to see, else in that game. 37-5, Colts blowing out the Bills. Now we jump to a good football game. Visiting Patriots. Putting up 38 points at Soldier Field against the Bears. Edging them out in that close shootout. And this was one of the best games of the day without question. Josh Gordon. The man got his first 100-yard receiving game with the Pats. This was a high-scoring game, back and forth all afternoon. It's I looked this up earlier, the Sony Michel injury. I'm sure a lot of people heard about that. It looked like a bad injury at first. It really did. I thought maybe, ACL, MCL, ankle, it looked really bad. But thankfully, MRIs came back, I think, earlier today or yesterday. Said he's fine. He might be week to week for a bit. But, that's just huge sigh of relief for the Patriots. They're loving this guy. This guy has been producing. And, he took off on an 18-yard run on the first play of the game. And, everyone was thinking, is it another 100-yard performance for Sony Michel? Couple touchdowns on the day. Finally a running back that the Patriots have been lacking for so many years. They finally found him. And he goes down earlier in the game. Thankfully the Patriots have James White. God, Brady loves him. James White, just real quick, he's like top 10 in fantasy for running backs, and I think he's averaging less than 6 carries a game or something like that. And he's just utilizing the screen game. He gets a receiving touchdown every game. It's insane. Cordero Patterson, he had an interesting afternoon for the Patriots, to say the least. He coughs up a kick return that the Bears recover and immediately answer with a score. The very next kickoff, Patterson runs it back 95 yards for the score. I mean, this guy is electric. He's being utilized well by the Pats in their offense. Josh McDaniels loves them. Belichick loves them. I mean, I was just shaking my head laughing. I was like, you kind of expect it with the guy. Got to kick the ball out of the end zone. Got to get that extra juice in the leg. Got to kick it out of the end zone of these guys. Trubisky, he led the Bears in rushing. I think the Bears, if they don't rank dead last, they're near dead last in yards per carry. I think only Arizona, and I forget who else is worse. But Trubisky's leading the Bears in rushing yards, and he led them with 81 yards on Sunday and scored on a wild run inside the 10-yard line. That highlight's been popping up all week. I'm sure you guys have seen that already. And, Pat's special teams, the Patriots' special teams, they were the real difference maker in this one. Returning a kickoff for a TD, like I mentioned, and then blocking a punt late in the third quarter, which they recovered for a score. And, my only problem with the Bears this game is I don't know if I'm the only one seeing this, but Trubisky, he tries to make a lot of these Patrick Mahomes type throws, scrambling out of the pocket, trying to sling it downfield, but he's not finding any success. He threw 2 late picks that pretty much sealed the game for the Patriots. And I really want to see more, sitting in the pocket and just leading your team on a nice drive. I understand the scrambling. I understand the rushing yards. We got to see more of that if this team wants to compete. And we're going to highlight the Bears midway through the podcast in our NFC North segment, so stay tuned for that. And the Bears, they tried to make a push late in the game. They were down 2 scores, scored a late touchdown to bring it to within 1 score. And they had a Hail Mary attempt. They caught it, but it was 1 yard short. Another highlight from this game and circulating all week. It was crazy. Josh Gordon mistimed his jump on defense, caught the ball, trying to push him, shove him, barrel his way into the end zone, fell short about a yard. And the Patriots come away with a big road win. Now we move down to Tampa Bay. Quite the circus of a game, to say the least, down in Tampa. The visiting Browns, Hugh Jackson, found themselves yet again in another overtime game. And the Browns got off to a terrible start. Punting the ball on every single possession they had in the first half and turning it over on downs once. I'm sitting there watching this game like, I really wanted to cover this game. I thought it was going to be a shootout. Thought we were going to see a lot of playmaking, out of this game from Mike Evans, Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb getting the start. But man, Cleveland was down 16-2 at half with only 3 first downs and no sort of momentum whatsoever. The only score for the Browns in the first half came from a safety where they tackled Peyton Barber in the end zone. That was it. No offense. Nothing was clicking. Nick Chubb, good to see him getting a lot of work on short notice and handling it well. After the Browns traded Carlos Hyde to Jacksonville for a 5th-round pick. Jacksonville really struggling for running back depth out there. Just cut Jamal Charles earlier in the day. No news of when Fournette's coming back. Again, similar to Dalvin Cook, lingering hamstring injury. Week to week, they might wait till the bye week to bring him back healthy. But again, Nick Chubb looked good. He got 80 yards, scored the ball on the ground. But the Browns were the Browns. They somehow, I don't know how they did it, they snuck back into this game. And just as I was about to stop watching, they scored 2 touchdowns late in the game to knot it up at 23 apiece. And Jarvis Landry, finally, thank God. Not just for the Browns, but for us fantasy owners, finally in sync with Baker Mayfield, 10 catches on the day and a touchdown. He looked great. He's crawling his way into the end zone for that touchdown. Wasn't sure if he got it, but, we didn't mention him in our stud section, but the man put up 25 fantasy points. And the interesting takeaway from this game, in my opinion, didn't come from the Browns. Didn't really come from Tampa Bay's lack of offense or their defense, but it was Deshaun Jackson. He didn't catch a pass at all during regulation in this game. And he was on the sideline with his helmet off. on the Buccaneers' final drive of the fourth quarter. I don't know what was going on there, but it was something interesting to highlight. He was kind of scolding a little bit, had his helmet off, shaking it. You know how Deshaun Jackson is. Eagle fans know him best. But, helmet off on the final drive of the fourth quarter. It wasn't like Mike Evans was having a monster day or O.J. Howard. I didn't understand it. Catanzaro, the kicker for the Bucs, missed a game-winning field goal. Not the only game-winning field goal missed on the afternoon across the league. He missed a 40-yard field goal as time expired. I don't think I've seen as many missed field goals and extra points as I did this past Sunday. It was ridiculous. After a lot of back and forth punting and ugly possessions for both teams in overtime, the Bucs, to everyone's surprise, gave Catanzaro another shot to win the game from 59 yards out. And he hits it. What's up with kickers this year? They're giving entire organizations heart attacks, fan bases heart attacks, week in, week out. I can't even watch kickers kick game-winning field goals anymore. I have to turn my head away. Tampa snuck out with this one late in overtime. If the Browns want anything to go for them this year, they got to stay out of these stupid overtime games. Now we move down to... Just going to take a minute before we talk about this game. The Jacksonville Jaguars playing host to the Houston Texans. Divisional game. Think it'd be competitive, battling for first place. This was a disgraceful outing, to say the least. This game got me worked up. This game got me really worked up, having to watch Jacksonville bury themselves alive on the football field for the third straight week. Fourth, for that matter. It was horrible. It was a disgrace. Now, let's start things off real quick with Blake Bortles fumbling on the third play of the game and then following up with 4 consecutive punts to finish off the first half. This team is terrible. Coming into Sunday, the Jags have been outscored 50 to nothing in the first half of their last 3 games. It's a joke. This team sucks. Jag fans practically started booing at kickoff. Saeed Khan probably thinking about wanting to sell his team and just watch Everton soccer out in England. This is just terrible football. This was a team that was 1 game away from the Super Bowl. Jags go into the locker room at halftime scoring a shocking, wait for this, 0 points at halftime. And Jags fans finally had something to cheer about in about a month's time. Blake Bortles. Doug Marrone said, "You're benched, buddy. It's about time." Blake Bortles leads the NFL in turnovers, responsibility for turnovers. This is just unbelievable. I look forward to watching Jacksonville play every week. I enjoy watching their defense, which somehow, by some miraculous miracle, still lead the league in total pass defense. Sub 200 yards a game, and they're getting blown out week in and week out. I do not understand this. I'm sorry, listen, Jacksonville, trading for Carlos Hyde is not going to fix this problem. Benching Blake Bortles is not going to fix this problem. There is something serious going on with this Jaguars, and I'm paying close attention to the defense when I watch. It's just arms in the air, shaking their head, not hustling, brushing each other off. Oh, my bad, bro, my bad. Next drive. Yeah, well, you're getting blown out every game. There is no next drive. It's got to be this drive. This defense got to figure something out. Tempers flaring in the Jags locker room after the game, not to anyone's surprise. No one knows what the hell's going on in Jacksonville. Not even the Jaguars. It took the Jags 40 minutes to run a play in the red zone. 40 minutes. Scored on a stupid scramble pass to TJ Yeldon. Again, gave the Jags something to cheer about after Stadium left by the third quarter. It was a disgrace. Nothing else to talk about in this game. Texans come away with the win, 20-7. The Jags got to figure something out. Playing Philly next week. I mean, this team sucks. Anyway, I had to get that game out of the way before it got me worked up even more. Going to move down to some nice warm weather. Miami hosting the Lions. They got off to a shaky start, the Dolphins. Brock Osweiler in his second start, only 42 yards of offense in the first quarter. And a lot of questionable play calling for the Dolphins in this game. It was a 3rd and 10 at some point in the first half. Can't exactly remember when. It was 3rd and 10, and they give an inside handoff. I think it was to Kenyon Drake. And got a yard. They were in scoring position, in field goal range. If they converted maybe 5 or 6 yards, they end up punting. And fans kind of started to grow a little restless. Started to hear some boos, started to hear some jeers. Everyone was scratching their heads. It was confusing. And then on the other side of the ball, you had Kerryon Johnson, who had an explosive day, finding 158 yards of turf on 19 carries, and he had a monster 71-yard run. He started the second quarter with 100 yards of rushing on only 4 carries, and this game started to get kind of out of hand early. Now, before we talk more about the game, I just want to talk about LeGarrette Blount, Kerryon Johnson, and the running back situation in Detroit. Okay, Kerryon Johnson is a guy I like a lot, promising young back with a lot of talent, and it's shown in all of his outings this year when he's getting the work, when he's getting the carries, when his number's getting called. The problem is that he's splitting carries, or in my opinion, he's getting carries stolen by LeGarrette Blount, who really, outside of goal line carries inside the 5, he hasn't really been doing anything. This was a perfect example of this on Sunday. Detroit had a 2nd and 1 in opponent's territory, and they gave the ball on 2 straight carries to LeGarrette Blount, who got stuffed at the line. I just don't get it. Listen, I understand he's a big physical running back, and you just need the 1 yard. But that's not the problem. It's when runs are getting blown up at the line of scrimmage. You need a guy like Kerryon Johnson handling the ball. He's not by any means as physical, a lower-the-shoulder kind of runner as LeGarrette Blount is, but he's shown he can kind of lower that shoulder, buckle up his chin strap, and he's shifty as well. This is frustrating to watch. I'm a big fan of Kerryon Johnson, and I hope he starts to get consistent work. We saw it spark against the Patriots earlier in the year. He had like 16 carries for 101 yards, but he's just getting robbed by LeGarrette Blount. Kerryon Johnson, when you got a young running back like this that's showing a lot of promise, a lot of talent, potential, give him the ball. This is the same problem with Joe Mixon in Cincinnati, which we'll talk about when we highlight the Kansas City blowout of the Bengals. But they really got to start giving Kerryon more balls to really balance this passing game out. We think of Detroit, we think of, down the field throwing team, Matt Stafford, a gunslinger. You need balance. They have it. And Kerryon Johnson, they're just not giving him the work. But let's get back on track. The Lions entering Sunday were the only team league-wide without a 4th down conversion. They finally got one Sunday, playing aggressive all day. I was really loved the way the Lions came out today. I'm sorry, not today, Sunday. Today's Tuesday. And tight ends. Got to talk about tight ends for a second. They've been few and far between in terms of production this year in the league and the passing game. But Michael Roberts for the Lions coming up big for Detroit, catching 2 touchdowns. Matt Stafford was looking for him all afternoon. And, the Lions, they've been playing a lot of up and down football all year. All year. 50-50. Every game. Getting blown out by the Jets in week 1. Blowing out the Patriots in a shocker in week 3. But then they look good on Sunday. And I like this young team led by Stafford, the gunslinger. They got a lot of potential. In our NFC North segment in a few minutes, we're going to mention them. Talk about Detroit's chances at the playoffs, where they stand in the NFC North, et cetera, et cetera. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the most physical game of the week. I love these physical football games. I look forward to them every week. Circle them on my NFL schedule. Say, this is the game I'm going to pay the closest attention to. And I was right. New Orleans at Baltimore. Battle of two giants on the defensive side of the ball. Ravens ranking number 1 in overall defense, and the Saints ranking number 1 in stopping the run. The pass defense is not that great for the Saints, but the run defense, spot on. The Saints started this game with a 20-play, 10-minute drive. Hard-nosed football. Third down after third down. Fourth down after fourth down. They converted on 3 fourth downs in the process of this 20-play drive to open the game. Unfortunately, they didn't have any points to show for it. They fumbled on their fourth down attempt. I think it was Taysom Hill inside the 10. And Harbaugh and the Ravens. They don't cower to this physical type of game. They answered right back. They were going for it on fourth down as well. This was fun to watch. Both teams really came out aggressive, really to play hard-nosed football. It was a treat to watch. You can't mention the Saints without Drew Brees. 500th career touchdown. Round of applause for that guy. And Lamar, and this is funny that I bring this up because I was just talking to a Saints fan earlier today about Taysom Hill. And Lamar Jackson and Taysom Hill, sorry, I just got a little sidetracked, but Taysom Hill and Lamar Jackson, it's a lot of fun to watch these two guys. I don't know if you guys watch them that much, but these are two dynamic quarterbacks, being utilized in both teams' offenses. Lamar Jackson for the Ravens, Taysom Hill for the Saints. They're being utilized outside of just sitting on the sideline with a headset on backing up the quarterback. Both teams are using these guys in unique packages, direct snaps, RPOs, direct quarterback runs, jet sweeps. It's fun to watch. And I would not be surprised if we see more athletic, explosive quarterbacks like these two guys being used more by other teams. These guys can not only throw the ball and they'll be legitimate, they're legitimate backup quarterbacks, but they're just explosive. They're athletic, they're fast, they're quick. They can catch, they can run. It's fun to watch. The Saints coming into Sunday, they led the NFL by a stretch in fourth quarter points with 72. Most fourth quarter points by a long shot in the NFL. And it was the difference in this game. They scored 10 points in the final quarter. Justin Tucker, Mr. Reliable, back and forth football game all afternoon. Never missed an extra point. Never misses an extra point in his whole career. Comes on for a game-tying extra points. The Saints came away with a hard-fought win in Baltimore. Justin Tucker missing the extra point as Baltimore drove down the field to potentially tie the game. It was 24-23 after Baltimore scored in the final minutes, and he whiffed the extra point. And it was a suspect kick, to say the least. That ball went right down the middle, and it looked about 10 yards short of going through the uprights. It just went right to the right. It just veered off to the right. Tucker couldn't believe it. Harbaugh couldn't believe it. That was interesting. But the Saints, proving why they're one of the NFL's best going into Baltimore, no easy place to win a game by any means, snuck away with the win. That game would have been fun to watch in overtime. That would have been anybody's game. But nonetheless, a great win for the Saints. Now we move on to Sunday night. I thought this was going to be the game of the week. Really should have been. Surprising blowout at Arrowhead. Vegas thought this would be a touchdown-like game. Since he came into Sunday night leading the NFL in red zone touchdown percentage with a 75% success rate, and their explosive offense equipped with weapons like A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon. Fans expected them to keep up with the pace of the Chiefs, but they fell short, about 35 points short. This was a 45-10 football game at the end of the fourth quarter. And, the Chiefs' defense coming into Sunday hadn't held opponents to a punt. and 17 consecutive drives. I thought that was an interesting stat. So, I'm sure that played a factor. Everyone was thinking, okay, since he's going to score a lot of points, going to drive down the field, going to be a back-and-forth touchdown game all night. Well, the game script did not go according to plan. Kansas City held the Bengals to a 3-and-out on the first drive of the game. And the Chiefs, they reeled in 145 yards of offense in the first quarter and held the Bengals to only 43. Now, Joe Mixon, I mentioned we were going to talk about him when I was talking about Kerryon Johnson. When he runs the ball, Joe Mixon, that is, he has a very Le'Veon Bell-like style of running. He's patient, choppy feet. It's rare running to see. You saw it in Oklahoma. You see spurts of it every now and then. But I don't understand Marvin Lewis and the Bengals. Mixon was getting 5 yards, 6 yards, 5 yards a carry, running the ball to start the game. And out of nowhere, Marvin Lewis can say, what the hell? Let's abandon the run game. Hey, Joe, take a seat. Let's just air the ball downfield, not give our defense any rest. And you know what, Joe? I think we're going to let the Chiefs control the pace of this game. If I'm Joe Mixon, I'm like, what's going on? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. Joe Mixon easily should have gotten 20 to 25 carries, helped out the Bengals in their cause to try to slow down the pace of this game, but it didn't happen. I mean, Mixon only carried the ball for 13 times in the game. And, it's understandable to an extent considering the script of the game, but the fact was Marvin Lewis just seemed to say, hey, run game? Nah. They abandoned it. It was still a manageable football game when they just seemed to abandon the run game out of nowhere. Bengals had a 1st and goal from inside the 5-yard line, and they didn't run the ball once. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Good football teams, everyone knows, when you're at the goal line, you run the ball. Fortunate enough, they scored their only touchdown of the game on that drive. But again, good football teams, you got to run the ball, man. Come on, Marvin. You're killing me. How do you still have a job? You got to run the ball inside the 5. It's ridiculous. Andy Reid's fleet began to set sail and just sail away in the second half, and the Bengals missed the ship. They're just waiting at the dock, watching Andy Reid just sail on down the river. Mahomes, 6th consecutive 300-yard passing game. Kareem Hunt with 3 touchdowns on the night, and Tyreek Hill doing Tyreek Hill things. It's just a disappointing outing from the Bengals. Not to take away or discredit anything the Chiefs did, of course. But, this looked so promising for the Bengals, and this is my problem. A.J. Green comes out of the gates firing, catching 6 passes for 100 yards, right? You got a guy as talented as A.J. Green who demands double coverage in the red zone, who's already caught 6 passes for 100 yards in the first half. You got a dynamic running back in Joe Mixon, a guy that can really carry the ball and balance out this game. It just doesn't add up. I'm not an NFL football coach by any stretch of the imagination, but when you got a guy who's already caught 6 passes for 100 yards, they gotta start playing in a nickel. They're gonna, the box is gonna be kind of empty. Joe Mixon is gonna be able to find creases, run up the field. Where is the balance? 13 carries is not enough. Should have gotten 13 carries in the first half. Marvin Lewis and these Bengals, got to figure something out. I'm going to pay close attention to them all week. Got to see more from them in the run game. We really do. And, the Chiefs' defense did a great job all night, surprisingly, at forcing punt after punt. And again, this is because the Bengals couldn't convert on 3rd downs. They didn't have any run game going. And it's just dropping passes, Andy Dalton lobbing the ball downfield, double coverage, overthrowing people, underthrowing people. It was just a very unfortunate, non-competitive football game that I, like many others, look forward to all week. I mean, this is horrible. I mean, the Chiefs steamrolled the Bengals by 35 points. Unbelievable. Well, anyway, that wraps up our Sunday recap, in-depth analysis of the games around the league. Now we're going to hop into the opinionated segment of the week. And for this episode, I chose to discuss the NFC North. And why, this is a division in the NFC that I think is the best right now. One of the best divisions in the league, if not the best. Most competitive, that is. And, we got the Vikings, winners of 3 straight. And they lead the division by a game at 4-2-1. That one tie coming, against Green Bay earlier in the year. And again, this is one of the most competitive divisions this year by far. This division really, as of now, looks like is up for grabs. These 4 teams have been flip-flopping and moving all around the standings, all year. So we're going to talk about the weakest team, who I think is the weakest team. Then we're going to talk about the 50-50 teams. And then we're going to talk about the front runner. So we're going to start with the weakest team. And I know I'm going to get a lot of heat for this and a lot of flack, but I truly believe that the Packers right now look like the weakest team in this division. Listen, they're tied for second, 3-way tie. I get that. No, I'm sorry, they're a half game ahead. I forgot they have that tie. So they're in second place, courtesy of that tie against Minnesota. But my problem with this is that late in the year, when you have a passer like Aaron Rodgers, got receivers like Devontae Adams, you have a highly explosive passing offense. They're only averaging 103 yards a game on the ground, which is 16 more yards a game than Minnesota. But you got to remember the Vikings have been without, Dalvin Cook for most of the year. And Latavius Murray is just starting to, run with a little bit more of authority the past 2 weeks. And the Packers have only scored 2 rushing touchdowns on the year, and their longest run has been 30 yards. I mean, they have no run game. I am not impressed at all. 2 weeks ago, we watched that Monday night game against the 49ers. They gave up 30 points against the Niners, who suck. I really don't think this team is as good as they've been hyped up this year. I really think this lack of balance on offense is going to come back to bite them later on in the year. And to be honest, I don't see this team making the playoffs. I really don't. Now we move on to the 50-50 teams. We'll start with the Bears, right? Okay, the Bears look good to start the year. Unfortunate loss to opening night against Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers coming back for that second half rally. Yeah, we all remember. But the Bears bounced right back. They won 3 straight. But now they're losers of 2 straight, giving up 30-plus points a game in both. But the Bears' offense isn't really their problem, right? They rank 6th in the league in points per game. They rank 6th in the league in rushing yards. Again, like I said much earlier in the podcast, a lot of that, if not all of it's coming from Trubisky on all these scramble yards. So I think that's a little bit of a fluffed-up stat that isn't really reflective of what the Bears' running backs can produce. Like I said, this is all scramble yards, but it's yards nonetheless. And, the Bears complete just under 50% of their third downs, which is very solid, for this young Bears team. But the problem is that despite, their blowout win against Tampa Bay, when Tampa's coach was like, oh, everyone deserves to be fired. We suck. This is a disgrace. They only beat Arizona by 2. The Bears, that is. They only beat the Cardinals by 2. The Cardinals are hands down not only the worst team in the league, they're like the worst offensive team, the worst run team, the worst yards per carry team. Their receivers don't do anything. Josh Rosen doesn't do anything. And you beat them by 2. That's questionable, right? And then they won a touchdown game against Seattle. They won that by 7. And, my problem is that Seattle and Arizona, both these teams aren't looking like threatening playoff teams. They're really not. Seattle's been struggling in the backfield all year, flip-flopping running backs. I mean, their rushing yards per game has been decent. But again, Doug Baldwin. Where's Doug Baldwin? Russell Wilson is on pace, I believe, for his worst quarterback rating of his career. He's not even averaging 230 yards passing a game. So I'm not really impressed too much with those 2 wins by the Bears. And, the Bears are not equipped to win shootout-like games. They gave up 30-plus points to Miami. They gave up 30-plus points this past week to New England. They just don't have the talent to compete in these shootout games against the teams down the road, right? And we saw it both in their losses to Miami and New England. The Bears need to buckle down on defense as well and not find themselves in these shootout-like games. If they can do that, keep opponents to under 24 points, 20 points, Bears got a really good chance to get a wild card, maybe even, make a push for the Vikings to win this division. Now we talk about our second 50-50 team here in the NFC North, and we got the Detroit Lions. I talked about a little bit how the Lions have played 50-50 football all year, and it's true, right? Listen to this. The Lions ranked 30th in the league in rushing defense, giving up practically 140 yards of rushing a game, but their pass defense is ranked 7th, only giving up just over 220 yards a game. I was kind of surprised also to see their offensive numbers. A lot of people like myself would think that the Lions put up a lot of passing yards a game, right? Matthew Stafford, when you think of the Lions, you remember Matt Stafford for years, airing it out to Megatron, right? Now we got Golden Tate, Kenny Galladay, Marvin Jones Jr., but they only rank 17th in the league, averaging 260 yards of passing a game. And I'm not saying that that's bad. And, their run offense ranks a little bit better. And I expect that will continue to grow as long, though, it's contingent, though, on Kerryon Johnson getting more volume, being on the field for more snaps, and being the primary workhorse in the backfield for the Lions. They lost their first 2 games of the year, blown out by the Jets at home. They lost to the Niners. Okay, so, that's a big question mark right there. But then they bounced back and beat New England, who's a top 5, team in the league. And they beat division rival Green Bay. If that's not the definition of 50-50 football, when you take into account their defensive stats, their offensive stats, and the teams that they've beaten and lost to, I don't know what a 50-50 team is. Very up and down team with a tough schedule remaining. They have a very hard schedule. They have to still play the Vikings twice, the Bears twice, and then they have to host both the Panthers and the Rams. They have a tough 5-game stretch coming up starting in November, which I think is the toughest stretch of any team, 5-game stretch. And starting in November, they have to play at Minnesota, at Chicago, host the Panthers, host the Bears, and then host the Rams. This is going to be a test for the Lions, to say the least. If they can come away with 2-3 wins in this 5-game stretch, I think that'll set them up nicely to make a push for a wild card spot, without a doubt. I'd like to see the Lions keep improving. Big fans of them. And we got our front runner. I don't think much to anybody's surprise in recent weeks. We got the Vikings, winners of 3 straight. Vikings holding the crown right now through 7 weeks in the NFC North. And Adam Thielen, he's not only is he leading the NFL in receiving yards, but he is also leading the league in receptions and targets. They have a very explosive receiving core. Kirk Cousins, a lot of people thought he got overpaid, including myself. But hey, he's completing 70% of his passes, 14 touchdowns and 3 picks. Sign that guy up for my team. Overpaid. I want him. 70% of his passes completed. 14 touchdowns, only 3 picks. I'll take him. And Latavius Murray, handling the workload well. When his number's called, he's really getting the yards that the Vikings need to try to balance out this pass and run game in the absence of Dalvin Cook. And their defense has been clicking lately. It's good to see. The Vikings' only bad loss, it's probably the question mark of the year, came at the hands of Buffalo back in week 3. Put up 6 points in that game. But since then, they look great. They lost a shootout in Los Angeles to the Rams and won 2 of their last 3 games on the road. And their run defense is top 5 in the league right now. and their pass defense has progressively been getting better, showing up big time this past Sunday against the Jets, picking Sam Darnold off 3 times. So there's a lot of... The ceiling is very high right now for the Vikings. I don't think it's limited by any means, and I think it'll only continue to grow if Dalvin Cook comes back healthy and if Latavius Murray, in Dalvin's absence, continues to do what he's been doing on the ground. The Vikings still have 2 guaranteed shootouts left. They got to host the Saints on Sunday night next week. Can't wait for that game. I'm hoping that's the game of the week on prime time. A little rematch of last year's divisional round. We all remember that game, the ghost tackle. And then they got to head to Foxborough early on in December. Cold weather game to take on Bill Belichick and the gang. This is 2 tough games that are going to be high-scoring affairs. And they still have 5 divisional games left. Last 2 games of the year are against the Lions and the Bears, which I think, and everyone probably does think, will have playoff implications. The way things have been going in the North, this is going to come down to Week 16, Week 17. Tiebreakers might even play a factor. In the last 2 games, they got to play the Lions and the Bears. And if things continue to go in the NFC North, I think the Minnesota Vikings will emerge victorious, host a team in the divisional round of the playoffs. In the wild card round. I don't think they're going to edge out. Now, it's tough to say if I think that they'll have a better record than the Saints. I think it's without question that they will not finish with a better record than the Rams. As of now, I think the Rams and the Saints, the way things have been looking, probably going to look like the 1 and 2 seeds respectively. But I see Minnesota being a 3 seed, hosting a 6 seed in the wild card round of the playoffs. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens when Dalvin Cook gets back off injury. We'll see what happens once Adam Thielen, if it ever happens, doesn't get 100 yards in a game. So this is going to be a fun team to watch for the rest of the year. And again, I really like Minnesota to, not easily, but I think they're going to edge, away from the rest of the North and come out with the crown at the end of the year. And that wraps up my opinionated segment for the week. Hope you guys enjoyed that edition. I'm going to try to make it something new and different each week to just have something to talk about for 10 minutes that, is a nice topic to talk about for football. But with that being said, we're going to jump into our last segment of the show, and that's the power rankings. Everyone's favorite. Now, these are all my opinion. This is who I think are the top 10 teams in the league. I'm not going to go too into detail as to why. We'll save that for another show. I just kind of want to give a brief overview as to who I think right now, 10 through 1, best 10 teams league-wide, AFC, NFC. So we'll start at number 10, and we head out to Pittsburgh. The Steelers, biggest winners on Sunday, without question. They got to sit at home during their bye week and watch the rest of the AFC North lose. So good for them. At number 9, I got the Redskins. Bounced back after a blowout loss to New Orleans 2 weeks ago, and they've won back-to-back games against Carolina and divisional rival Dallas. So I like them at number 9. At number 8, we got the Panthers. Comeback win of the year in the NFL on Sunday. Big win in Philly. At 6, I got the Baltimore Ravens. Best defense in the league. Hard-nosed physical football. Unfortunate, heartbreaking loss to the Saints on Sunday. But, I really like them at number 7. This is still a strong team. They're going to compete. They're going to be a force in the playoffs. They're going to give some teams some trouble. And moving on to number 6, got the Vikings. Winners of 3 straight, like we just talked about. High-scoring team, and the defense is getting better. Now we talk about my top 5 teams. And we'll start out the AFC West with the Chargers. Even with Melvin Gordon being sidelined this week in London, which, by the way, I didn't get to cover that game. Honest, slept through it. But anyway, Chargers still won that game. Young talent and veteran Phillip Rivers making some noise in the AFC. And at number 4 is the Patriots. Now, I was debating whether or not to put the Chargers at 4 or the Pats at 4. Because, it's hard to forget that loss the Pats had to Detroit and Jacksonville. But I forgive them because those are 2 of the top 10 pass defenses in the NFL. And the Pats are looking scary. Edelman back His snap count's gone up every game since he's been in New England. Targets have been up every single game since he's been in New England. And, they might take a little bit of a setback. We'll see how well James White handles the workload and Sony Michel's absence over the next few weeks. But as of now, I like them at number 4. And at number 3, the best run defense in the league, we have the Saints. One of the best quarterbacks in the league, high-powered offense. That combo with Kamara and Ingram is a lot for defenses to handle. Then you got Michael Thomas. So this team, Taysom Hill, this team, if their defense can buckle down, not their run defense, more so their pass defense, which has just been very bad this year in terms of forcing turnovers. I like them to compete with the Rams in the NFC. And for the number 2 and 1 spot, this was tough, but number 2, we have the Chiefs. Most fun team to watch, hands down. Only loss of the year coming against that, the Patriots in that shootout a couple weeks ago. And, there's just too much talent on this team for defenses to contain. Their defense has only been growing over the past few weeks. They were on pace for, the worst defense in NFL history in terms of, giving up yards per game. And they've improved. We saw it Sunday night against Cincinnati. And at number 1, I think everyone knows who this is. We have the Rams, undefeated. Only team left in the league that's undefeated. Todd Gurley leading the charge. Young quarterback. Receivers are young. I love this receiving core. I don't know what the status on Cooper Kupp is heading into next week. You got Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. That's a very, very balanced team. And, a young head coach, Sean McVay. Who's going to beat them? I'm curious to see when they fall, if they do fall. So that wraps up my power rankings. And just to close out the episode this week, we're just going to preview Week 8 for you guys next Sunday. And we have Tennessee, the Chargers, the Cowboys, and the Falcons all on their bye weeks. We have the Dolphins taking on the Texans Thursday night. Houston looking to extend their streak in that one in the AFC South. And we got the Eagles and Jaguars. Big question mark game of the week, I think, in that one. That's the London game. Jaguars technically home in that one. 2 teams coming off terrible losses this past week. Ravens taking on the Panthers in what I expect to be a low-scoring game in that one. That's going to be in Carolina. Then we have a nice divisional game. We have Denver. Rematch like earlier in the year. This time they're going to be playing at Arrowhead against the Chiefs. We got the Browns, another divisional game at Pittsburgh. Gritty games as always between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh coming off their bye week. Still no sign of Le'Veon Bell. Expect James Conner. Big production in that one. Then we got the Seahawks playing at Detroit. Seahawks, again, another team coming off a bye. It's going to be fun to watch. I'm really curious to see. Both these backfields have been question marks all year for the Seahawks and Lions, respectively. So we'll see how that one shapes up. And then we have what I expect to be a shootout, I think. We got the Buccaneers traveling to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. I am praying, not just for fantasy purposes, because I just love the guy. I really hope that Marvin Lewis and this ridiculous coaching staff, draws up on the whiteboard, starts saying, hey, guys, I really think we got to stop abandoning the run game. So I expect the high-scoring one in that one. I expect a lot of touches for Joe Mixon. Going to see a lot of yards coming out of A.J. Green and Mike Evans. Fun one to watch in that. Then we got the Jets traveling to Soldier Field to take on the Bears. Both teams coming off bad losses. Then we got divisional leaders, Redskins, taking on the Gutterball Giants at 1 o'clock out in MetLife Stadium. Not much to watch in that one. And we got Indianapolis taking on the Raiders. Raiders coming off a bye. And, I already see it. I'm going to have to talk about the Raiders next week. What the hell is John Gruden in this? What are they doing? I get it that Amari Cooper has not been performing well this year, but they just traded Amari Cooper to Dallas. Sure, they got a first-round pick for it. But what are they doing? I'm really just... scratching my head, I'm trying to think, what is this front office doing? What is John Gruden doing? Excuse me. They got 3 first-round picks in next year's draft, I think. So it's really looking like they're going to tank this year, remain at the bottom of the league, probably finish off with like 2 wins, and just they're in full rebuild mode, and that's what it looks like. And then we have another terrible game. We have the 49ers playing the Cardinals in the 4 o'clock window. Really nothing to see in that game. I mean, 2 of the worst offenses in the league going head-to-head. The sad thing is one of these teams has to win this game, or we could see a tie. The other 4 o'clock game, we have Green Bay traveling to LA to play the Rams. I expect a high-scoring game in this one. A lot of passing yards to be had. And, this is a Packers team that by no means is going to, cower to the Rams. I think they're going to put up a fight. I think this is going to be a competitive football game. Hopefully they can contain Todd Gurley, keep him out of the end zone. I doubt it, but we'll see. And then game of the week, Sunday night, rematch. We talked about it a bit earlier. Saints-Vikings in Minnesota. Primetime on NBC. That's going to be a fun game to watch. Going to be a lot of hype around that game. I'm sure of it. Can't wait to see it. And then Monday night, got an AFC East divisional game. We got the Patriots traveling up north to Orchard Park to take on the Bills. Don't expect this to be much of a football game. I think that this game will be over by the start of the second quarter. I think that the Patriots will win this game by 25, 30 points. And I think that's all in that game. So that wraps up the episode for this week, guys. We went a little over an hour. I had to cram a lot of information in to discuss this week. I was really excited for this episode. Got a lot of good feedback on my first one, so I was pumped. Super excited to do this one. Super excited to do next week. Can't wait already. I just want Sunday to be here. But with that being said, thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and hopefully see you guys next week.